now you're kind of viewed as this, oh, she's got it all set. Is there anything raw that you remember as a parent going through that journey and being like, oh man, I don't know what the hell I'm doing?
Well, yes, there have been experiences like that. And it's mostly when my child or children were in a new phase and I was still in the old phase. And, with children, they're like, that could happen in a week, right? Oh, yes. Now we have this great routine where they always sleep this long after we do this. And then it just, as soon as you get into it, it's gone, right?
For those who don't recognize the voice, the woman speaking is Janet Lansbury, author of the very popular books Elevating Childcare and No Bad Kids, and host of the hugely popular podcast Unruffled Respectful Parenting. If you don't already know this, a lively mother of three and a great advocate of RIE, Resources for Infant Educarers, you are in for a treat today. Now, I'm not going to do a big bio intro for Janet, as she's pretty much so well known that you could easily Google everything in a few seconds. I will say, though, that I am personally thankful and grateful to have her on, as for me, she's really carrying the torch of a parenting hero of mine, and that's the late Magda Gerber, who's the originator of RIE. So just as a quick example of some of Magda's wisdom, this is from her book, Your Self-Confident Baby. Quote, "Be honest with a child. It's okay to say, I'm tired right now. I'm listening to you, but I am tired. That teaches the child reality. You must listen to your own needs too. In this way, you will also help him learn to listen to his." End of quote. So the one thing I've loved about Magda, and now about Janet and RIE just generally, is the focus on respect and joy for both child and adult. I've been working with children for the past 20 years, and I have found that their emphasis on respect is at the core of being successful with children. Actually, of just being successful with anyone. So if you are looking for insight and practical guidance on being better with children and with ourselves, with one another, then you're going to enjoy this conversation with a woman who has a lot to offer. So get ready for Janet Lansbury, who I want to note actually showed up on the day of recording, even though she was sick. In other words, Janet is even more badass than you might have already thought. All right, here we go, everyone. The educator Dr. Maria Montessori once said,
"The child developing harmoniously and the adult improving himself at his side make a very exciting and attractive picture."
Welcome to Montessori Education with me, Jesse McCarthy, where we talk raising children and educating students while bettering ourselves right alongside them. Janet Lansbury, thank you so much for hopping on with us.
Thank you for having me, Jesse. I'm honored.
I mean, I've been following your work for years now. Magda Gerber is, and I don't say this lightly, but she is a hero of mine. So, I really, really do appreciate you coming on and talking about RIE and some other stuff as well. So again, thank you.
It's my pleasure. And yes, she's Magda's hero of mine as well, obviously.
So maybe just starting off, without getting too kind of academic about it, I don't know if you want to give an anecdote or whatever, but what do you see? What is RIE? Kind of summed up or something.
Summed up, it's giving a baby from the time they're born the same respect as you would an older person. And the way we would define that and the way that would look is obviously what matters. But because we all probably think we do that. But with this approach, we try to see their point of view. We see them as a person with a point of view. We see them as a person with their own talents and capabilities and likes and dislikes. And it's, far from the blank slate that people used to once think that babies were. Mm-hmm. So we're welcoming them into the world and into a relationship with us right from the beginning, rather than waiting until before I would have found out about this work. I probably would have thought, well, when my baby's walking or talking or whatever point, now they're a person.
Yeah.
This helps us see that they actually are there and they're waiting to be a part of a relationship with us right away.
Yeah, and it's wild because I felt the same way like before I got into Montessori and just kind of a respect for children. I was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm doing the real work with the older kids. I was working with like say 7th and 8th graders, and those little babies, they're just, they're doing their own thing. It was kind of like they're a different species almost.
Exactly.
And I'm curious because in our field, it's mainly women, or it's a lot of women, and it's a lot of mothers that really dive into this stuff. So I'm curious if I can kind of push back as like the every now and again I'll get a dad that's like, what do you mean, respect for the child? Are you going to raise my child so they just get beat up out in the real world? That kind of feeling. How do you respond when somebody, they hear respect and they're like, why would you respect a baby? I mean, they can't even talk to us. Like, how do you deal with that?
Well, you can't make people see a different thing than the way they see. All you could do is offer them opportunities to see. So the way that we normally teach is in-person classes where people bring their baby. I mean, first of all, they have to want to be there. You can't really teach people that don't want to learn. So if somebody's in the position that I was when I was a new parent, feeling really lost and wanting some direction, open-minded, then going to a class was a great thing. And then what happened is you're asked to observe, have your baby in a comfortable position, on the floor, and you're there observing, and you see for yourself that they have their own thoughts, their own ideas, that the things that we might project on them, and it's very natural to do that, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we want to try to be aware of it, are not the truth a lot of the time, that they do have, they are their own separate person. So it's something you really ideally will have to see with your own eyes. But I've written a lot and podcasted a lot about how this looks, and hoping that people will try it for themselves and see it. But again, it's something that you can't really force. But the thing about giving, a lot of people, for one thing, they will say, oh, you're treating babies as little adults. And I find that interesting, because what does that belie when people see it that way?
Mm-hmm.
They're saying a baby can't possibly be treated like that because they're not a person, but an adult is a person. So therefore, if you're treating them like a person, you're treating them like an adult. So it's kind of proving the point of the way that we see babies as a society is that they are this other species, that this sort of less than half-baked species, and they should be treated differently. But then the next question that comes up for me is, okay, and I've asked this in comment threads and with people before, well, at what age would you start talking to them? At what age would you consider them a person? Where is this line that they suddenly cross for you? Because that's interesting to me. And what I loved so much about Magda's work was that there wasn't a line. It was right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And that clarity is so freeing if you can embrace it, if you could see it that way. It's, wow, oh, I don't have to, now I suddenly get to do something different. You're actually meeting your child where they are as a person right from the beginning. And all the way through until they're the age my kids are, which is one's in their 30s and the other in their 20s.
It's crazy listening to you because it's very good. So I'm happy to hear what you're saying. So I'm curious later, maybe we can talk about RIE and Montessori, and how they're related or different. But one thing is you say this line, and I think to myself, how many people in life that line never actually goes? There's never respect. So it's always like a parent-child relationship, because they can't ever see you as a full independent human being. They just see you as their child. I mean, not that we would ever lose completely, this is my child, but that respect that, oh, this person can achieve and succeed on their own without me.
You're talking about parents, how they see their children.
Yeah.
The thing is, if we think that a baby is a little bit less than or incapable totally of anything. I mean, obviously they're not capable of a lot of things, but there are some things they are capable of that with this approach, we want to try to encourage and allow and make space for them to get to try and do. That's how they feel like agents in the world. But if we don't, which is the way most of us believe we're supposed to be parents, I mean, I did, then there's this feedback loop that starts happening where our child is seeing what we're seeing because we're acting on what we're seeing. So we're seeing that they can't do anything, so we're not allowing them to do anything. And then that convinces us that they can't do anything. And then it kind of goes back and forth like that. So you have an adult, you know, and now there's this issue that's people talk about overparenting that's creating anxiety in adults, depression, this sense that there are passengers to their own lives. And this is where it starts, is with babies. Because if we can get on this track right away or as soon as possible, that won't happen. Because we'll see all along, we'll hold space for our child to be capable. We'll see, oh my gosh, they are capable of this. Or, oh my gosh, they did this whole different thing that I thought they were going to do. And it's actually much better, I think, for them because they're into this. We see that way. And then that's how our relationship with our child is formed, where we're affirming who they are instead of trying to manage who they are, decide who they are. And so that's why it's so important to try to start early if we can.
Yeah. And you talking about just the way that you might communicate with another person, you started, which I think is awesome, with, well, I'm going to have them observe. So I'm curious, have you found in the RIE community, where I'd say the RIE movement, a lot of people tend to want to, like convince other people, I'm going to tell you what's going on. And they don't go to the observation with the adult as you would think they would, but they go towards the lecturing. I'm going to convince you of this. Do you see that in RIE, or do you see many people like you that are like, oh, well, why don't you come in the room? Let me show you, so that the other adult can learn through their own eyes and ears and experience versus kind of being lectured at by another, convert to RIE or convert to Montessori in our case.
When you're trained to become a RIE teacher, it's actually quite a long process. And that's partly because it's not only about understanding the perspective and absorbing it deeply. And as you go, I mean, time goes by and you start to get it more and more. It takes time, and not just to absorb facts, but to digest them and really start to change your lens. It does take time. So there's that. But then the big piece of training is learning how to teach this. That's really the thrust of the training.
To other adults, that's what you're saying.
To be a RIE associate, yes. So how do you do that? And so it's
interesting.
You're taught and you learn that it doesn't work to try to convince anybody. That's never going to work. It's just like the way children learn. They learn best through them following their own interests. So a parent asks a question and you answer that question as best you can, or you say, look, here your child is actually doing that right now. Or you find a way ideally to show them, but otherwise you can just verbally answer the question. So there's that. And then there's them you modeling it. So that's a big part of it. When in the classes that we do, the parents observe mostly, and we observe while children are playing. But then when there's an interaction that's going on between children where maybe they need a little type of intervention, like maybe a child's coming way at a child too fast and they're grabbing their hair, we model how to intervene very effectively, but also respectfully, in a way that both children are still encouraged to keep exploring each other and and keep learning. Yeah. So we're modeling. So children learn from following their interests, from what we're modeling as parents. We've all heard that it doesn't matter what we try to tell them to be, it's who we are that they're that's the lesson they're getting all the time, every single second, is the way that we are with them and the way they see us with other people.
Yeah.
So we do the same when we teach this approach. But what happened to me and what happens to a lot of people is when they're first learning it as a parent, that's when we want to go tell everybody what to do.
Yes. Right.
And so sometimes you'll get that just from other parents, and then maybe it gives you the impression, oh, these RIE people think they know it all and they're really positive. That's understandable because the parents are so excited. And I remember this stage where they just want to convert everybody or something, or, as if it's a religion, which it certainly is not. But and they want everybody to see what they're seeing because they're so excited. And it's so different from what the mainstream is doing. So that's what happens. And then people, and also they're maybe out there demonstrating it in ways that they're not quite, it hasn't really sunk in deeply yet. So they're kind of giving a not so great impression of what RIE is out there on the playground, because they're like, oh, my kid can come hit your kid and take their toy. Sure. I get a lot of that. Oh, this RIE thing. You just
do whatever you want.
Be, awful with each other. And it's not like that at all. It's actually we're quite on top of every boundary. We're very strict in a way, but it's just the way that it's done is not harsh or mean. It's loving, but it's very strict. We don't let kids run around the store screaming,
So maybe what you raised about RIE, I think, is the normal concern that I hear is this kind of, well, if there's no guidelines for children, then they'll just do whatever they want. You're saying they could just yell at each other. So why don't you just jump into maybe a specific there around that? Is it just pure freedom, or do you guys have limits, or how do you approach this whole thing of children's behavior? And I'm sure it's going to relate to children's emotions too, but what does RIE do with that?
Well, Magda always said that there is no freedom without boundaries. And so boundaries are actually the first thing that we do before we let children follow their own interests in terms of play and all that. So the boundary is the play space, or when it's an infant, or maybe it's their crib or their playpen, or within that boundary, we are allowing the child to be free to decide, I'm just going to stare at this wall for 20 minutes, or I don't want to be here at all today, or I'm going to try to grab toys, but you're not going to assume that I want that in my hand. I'm just maybe reaching out. So I said, try to grab toys, but maybe we don't know. We just see them reaching out towards a toy. Maybe they want to look at what their arm looks like in that position. Maybe they want to stretch their arm. They don't have those answers like how it should be. We teach them that. So that part we want to let our child guide, but we've set up the boundary with the play space already so that they're safe. They have the freedom to do that without us saying, oh no, don't touch this and don't touch that. And here comes the dog and all of those things. So anyway, so it starts with boundaries. And then other boundaries are the routine that we have for the day. So that's an early way that children learn about boundaries and structure, that we try to have a predictable routine to the day that we form around our child's needs, what they've shown us that they need. And there generally are some rhythms that most children have, but we want to serve that child's rhythms and our needs as a parent, not just put some structure in there that is just from the outside. So we're developing it with our child, but then we try to stick to this. And what that does is it helps our child know, okay, we're doing this. Let's say it's a toddler. We're going to clean up this stuff and put it in the basket before we have our lunch or whatever it is. So they get into that rhythm, and it's much easier for them to accept those boundaries when it's just a matter of course. It's part of their day. It's something that's familiar to them, that they actually kind of like knowing, oh, this is going to come next. And I knew this. And here's the part where my mom says, could you help me? And I say, no, I don't want to. And then she says, well, can you just put some of the balls over there, And then we say, okay, she said it so nicely, I'll do it or whatever. But, or maybe I won't today, but we don't make a big deal out of that. But there are things where we can stop them, where we have to stop them. You're throwing this towards the window. I can't let you do that. So could you stop? Looks like you can't stop. So I'm going to have to stop you. So we're right on that. We're not asking them, please stop, please stop, please stop. And there they go. We're seeing that if they're stuck somewhere, then especially we know it's the end of their playtime and they're probably tired, that we're going to help them by not standing there nagging them from across the room. We're going to come over and go, you know what, I'm going to stop this. And we're helping ourselves too, from not having to get annoyed and more annoyed each time we try to ask our child to do something and they don't do it. So in that sense, we're very much on it, or we try to be. Obviously, we're not always going to be, but we try to be on top of things. And so that's how it starts. And then we allow for our child to be upset if we're doing those things. Again, it's works better and it's easier for us and for our child if it's a predictable thing that happens. Like every morning we have this playtime where I sit with you for a bit and I'm here totally with you, observing you and interacting with you when you invite me to. Or I'm not saying you can't also play with the child. You could, sure. And then there's this time where I get up and I go in the kitchen and I do some stuff, or I go to the bathroom and then I'm leaving you in this play space that's safe for you. And you don't want me to go. And, of course, you don't have to want me to go, but I'm still going to go.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit there and take my extra time to try to prove a point to you, because I'm not trying to train you. I'm just being a human being in a relationship with you. And we would do that with a baby. I mean, we're not going to leave them crying for a long time, but we would say, you're in your place. I'm going to go get my tea. Oh, no, I hear you. Okay, I'll be right back. And then we come back. But we allow for that sense that our child is learning, oh, there is another person here that has needs. And it's not all about me every second. And this parent is going to take care of themselves because they care about their relationship with me so much, instead of sitting there going, oh, I'm just dying here, like sitting here without any caffeine or whatever, or I'm so hungry, or I'm so, I can't. And now our child's getting that vibe, right? When we're sitting with them, which is worse than not being with them. you know?
And that it's amazing how similar these approaches are, because anybody that's in Montessori that's listening to this is going to be like, well, this is Montessori. So they're going to see it as almost the same, because we have freedom within limits, they would say. But I think what I find, I love reaching out to see different approaches that, kind of aid in what we're up to in Montessori, or really just with children generally. I don't even think of myself as a Montessori. It's just like what works with children. And I think what RIE offers, and what I'm hearing you talk about a lot, is that there's a lot of practical guidance, particularly for, the home, which Montessori was not originally done for the home, was for classrooms. But you just have this, first there's the limits, and then there's a freedom within those limits. But you also have a kind of, well, what happens when the child does something that you don't want them to do? And I think in Montessori, since usually these materials in the classroom, there's a lot that children actually want to do these things. So you would think that there's no, quote, discipline necessary. They just do, you're trained, they'll just go right to this activity and do it. But that's not actually the reality. Like, you're going to have struggles. So you guys in RIE, and what I know with Magda is that she just offers a sense of like, hey, be honest with the child. Tell them how you're feeling, which is just, it's a refreshing thing. And I think Montessorians need more of this, that you communicate to the child as if they can understand you. And you have this open talk, which I don't see emphasized as much in Montessori. And part of it is, I think, you're dealing with older children. But I'm curious, that element that I think is relatively unique to Magda, and a man named Haim Gnat, which I'm curious if you know of him, but how did she come about to just be so direct? And like, again, like going back to the beginning, where you're just talking to them so they can understand, like they're this human being. Like, how did she come to feel that way or to see the world that way? Do you have any insight into that?
She's Hungarian. No.
Very direct.
They're very authentic.
Yes.
They're very authentic. But no, it's this thing of, well, Magda was that. She was the most authentic person I've ever met. Scarily so sometimes, that she could see right through you if you were BSing in any way.
Yeah.
She saw right through it. But it really just stems from that respect that you have from the beginning. Like, what does respect mean to you? Does it mean, oh, let's play a game and pretend, and then all of a sudden now I'm brushing your teeth and you didn't even know this was happening? Or, oh, you're upset. Look at this thing over here. Woo-hoo. Like, you don't have to feel like that. Is that respect? Or is it more respectful to do what seems scary for people like me? I mean, I grew up in America with a lot of, we're just all so friendly even when we don't feel like it, and it's not like Magda was ever rude or anything, but
yeah, but it's phony.
Hi, how are you? You know, it's a whole different vibe.
Yeah.
And then, you know, so, but it's harder to say, and I'm still learning this with adults. Was nice to be able to learn with children and to get that practice with adults, but it's still hard for me with adults to say, actually, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Or that doesn't feel good, or I don't want you to, I don't like when you say it that way to me, or but that's much more loving than, I mean, I think of I don't know how this is going to sound, but I think of all the dates where I was afraid to say I didn't want to see someone again. And those days we didn't have text messages. So
you had to say it in person.
You have to avoid them somehow. And then when you saw them, you would say, oh, okay, sure. We'll get together next week. And then you hope, and then you just keep putting it off. I mean, that's not loving. That's not really caring about that person. It's much more caring to say the truth. I'm not feeling this. And I never once was able to say that to someone. I just tried to snake out of it.
Yeah. It seems like that's the culture of not hurting somebody else's feelings, but not thinking about your own, or maybe pushing down your own, is what I came to see.
Right. And it doesn't help that person's feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the fantasy, I think. Oh, I'm going to save their feelings, but I'm just really saving my own discomfort of someone not liking me or being mad at me or rejecting me in some way. I'm really saving myself, honestly, because this was me to a T. So I know that it's chicken and it's not helpful to that person. There are plenty of kind ways you can say really hard things to people.
Yeah. So maybe as a concrete example, because I think this comes up a lot in Montessori with parents, and I have to imagine in RIE, I've heard a bunch of your episodes and I know it comes up, but can you just walk a parent through, because I'll hear a parent go, oh, my child was having a tantrum and I just sat with them for an hour and I just said, you're all right. But it was phony. Like that parent didn't want to be sitting there. They didn't want to be doing it, but they were, doing the right thing by sitting. Can you, I know Magda is kind of like, be honest with the child, tell them how you're feeling. Can you just walk us through, what would you give as guidance to a parent who is kind of not the old school traditional, just like, suck it up, stop being a baby, but they've gone the full other route and they'll just sit for hours on the floor talking about feelings when they don't even want to be there themselves. So what kind of guidance can you give to that type of parent?
Well, I just want to speak to what you said about telling them the truth, because there's a difference in, I wouldn't say to a child, your behavior is really, your feelings are really irritating me right now, if I could help it, because I would want to look at, why do someone else's feelings irritate me? Why is it not okay for them to feel what they feel? So I do have, and this was one of the really profound things I learned from Magda right in the beginning that just struck me as, oh my gosh, this is so different and I need to know more about this. The whole thing about whatever a child is feeling, they're allowed to feel. But there's a big difference between accepting feelings and sitting there like we're in a movie theater with our child's feelings. That's actually not accepting feelings. That's me saying, okay, I've got to sit here until you feel better, instead of saying, so the honest thing would be, you don't like that this happened, or this is your whatever. Maybe you're not even saying that much if the child is screaming at you, and you're accepting while you're carrying on with what you need to do. I've got to go in here and finish this, and I'll be back and check on you and see how you're doing. But I'm not a captive audience to every feeling that you have, as if this is an unnatural crisis situation that you need me to be with you through. I mean, obviously, if it was a real crisis situation that our child was going through or having some trauma, yes, we would stop everything and be there. But most of the time, it's, you're mad at me about that, and I totally accept you. That doesn't mean I'm stuck to you like glue, because if we really look at ourselves honestly there and think about what we're doing, we feel like this is what we need to do to fix this, this is the response we're supposed to do, instead of acceptance can look like a lot of different things, right?
Yeah.
So acceptance is what we want to do, not whatever that is, whatever you would call what you were talking about, being stuck with you until you feel better. And that's the difference that the visual I like is the anchor with the wave passing by, rather than a lot of times people will say, I'm riding with the wave with my child.
Yeah.
It's not going to work, because children have a lot of waves and ups and downs. And if we're riding those with them, we're not going to last very long without blowing up. I mean, we're just not, unless we're a martyr or something. And it's not good for them either. What's good for them is, I'm here, you're doing that. I accept that. I'm not trying to change that or push back on it, but I'm not riding it with you. You need to be here stable and be the anchor.
Yeah. And you're saying kind of even the martyrs, that we just have this sense that, oh, if I really had my act together and I could remain calm, I would be there for them for as long as necessary. When I love your approach, and thinking of Magda, it's not just that you go up and go, oh, I can't, telling honesty is like, oh, I can't stand you being upset. No, but it's like, I hear you, but I'm tired right now. So it's not this, oh, you're allowed to just go off, and I'm here as kind of like, as you said, like I have to sit through this movie. So I don't look at it as kind of like a mean thing, as more of just, as you said, kind of being an anchor for them. And so do you call it in RIE acknowledging emotions, when you kind of say, oh, you're feeling this way? Or how do you go about that with the emotions if they're, feeling these quote big feelings?
Yes. And I'm going to say something unpopular. I actually don't like that expression, big feelings, because it's like we're quantifying a child's feelings. I love that people are using it with adults now, but it started out when I started out online blogging and everything, that sort of started coming up, that people would use that, and it was always about children. Oh, they're so little and their feelings are so big. And it was just, it's not the way you would talk to anybody but a child.
You must get, I gotta say, you must get hate mail, because I just feel like, like there's a big like mama bear culture. Like it's just it's not like real talk with a child. So how do you deal with people that are kind of on you about like, why can't I say big feelings? It's my, like, what do you do?
Well, I'm not telling you that they can't say it. I'm just saying no, they can say whatever they want. I'm not telling anyone what to say or do. I'm just saying that I personally would never use that expression, but everybody, people I love use it. I mean, lots of people I follow use it. It's not, not mad at them for using it. To me, it rubs me as, well, your feelings are so big, instead of you didn't want this and you don't like that, and you're saying this, or something much more the way we would talk to a friend.
Yeah, or like a significant other or like a spouse. Oh,
Yeah,
you're having big feelings right now. They'd
right.
slap
I
you.
mean, they would probably slap us if we did that.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the beginning with the respect, though. It's like it is a sign of disrespect if you're talking to them in this kind of diminishing way. Like,
Yes,
oh wow, you're so upset. There's big giant feelings. It's just, I don't know, we turn
right.
into this, like we even speak differently. We just all of a sudden transform into this weird entity, you know?
That's interesting to hear that from a man. Are you a dad?
Yeah, so I'm a dad, and I mean, I've been working with kids for 20 years. I mean, I even opened
Right.
one of the first infant programs, Montessori, in Orange County. So I have a lot of experience. I think 20 years ago, I would not have been talking like this.
Do
I would have
do
been.
men do
Yeah.
this also? Do that
I
kind of
think no. I think. I mean,
not as
generally,
much?
I don't want to speak for all men, but I mean, generally, our field is like. I mean, if I go to a conference, I'm speaking somewhere, it's like 95% women,
Totally.
and then the dads that come are very rare, and they would be taught. They would be problem solvers. They'd be talking to the a 1-year-old as if he's a 20-year-old and can figure this out through reason.
Right. Why you
That's
shouldn't
the
feel
job.
like that? You should feel like this because
Yes,
look.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't get a lot. I mean, there are a few dads now kind of moving over towards this, and you can see them sitting on the floor for hours, but that's the rarity. So yeah. I mean, what about you guys? I mean, what's the percentage of people coming into this that are dads now? Curious.
Well, in the time that I've taught, it's been so refreshing because more and more dads, a lot of times it would be the dad that brings the baby to class and not the
Yeah.
mom. Or two dads or um
Yeah.
so it's been really very refreshing to see. And also my book No Bad Kids has been really popular with dads. I have a lot of dads coming up to me and or writing to me and um about that, and to the podcast too. I think dads
Yeah.
podcasts are a dad friendly way to take in information. It seems to be something that works for a lot of men. So
Yeah, I
it's really
agree.
nice. I love it. I love it. And I never want to discourage it. Only
No, it's
encourage it.
awesome. I love that you're out there doing it too, and I can totally see why dads are kind of flocking to that. I definitely see what I found challenging for some people is that they, with this kind of children are bullies, and they can't see that like at 2, 3, 4 years old, this is natural stuff. If you're biting or hitting, like we have to work
Right.
through that. Where a lot of dads and moms that are some of them, I mean, both can be sensitive, but oftentimes I'll see moms in schools where it's like, what, you got to get that kid out of the school, and it's like a 2-year-old, so they just can't see the developmental element of it. I'm
Right.
curious, since you work with, are you still doing live in person work, or is that kind of phased out? I haven't.
Well, I've been doing some in-home consultations, but I'm writing a book right now and I am
Awesome.
doing the podcast. And so between those two things, I've had to just take a step back from classes, but I'm very eager to get back into it as soon as I get done with this book, because I miss that so much. And when I do in-home consultations, I love it because I get to see again, just in front of me, how well this works.
Yeah.
And when you're kind of from afar just talking about it and writing about it, you don't get those reminders or that
Yeah.
really reassurance, but just affirmation, and that of like, wow, yeah, this isn't nothing. This
Yeah.
is very profound, and it really works.
Yeah, I'm seeing because online stuff is so huge now. I'm seeing a lot of young teachers think, "Oh, I'm going to jump off and do consulting," and I'm just like, man, the more experience you can get with actual children, get it, because once you jump out, you lose that connection. So I think you're right
Yes.
on.
And you
So,
stop really learning on that level. I
yep,
did it
I
for
agree.
whatever. I was teaching up until a year ago, 2 years ago. So yeah, I had whatever 20 something years of teaching in the classroom. And yeah, I mean, I could still learn more, but that's where
Oh
you're
yeah,
learning and learning and
yep,
learning and learning and developing your own ideas instead of just taking other people's ideas, repackaging them or whatever.
yeah. So in that, why don't we? Because I think RIE and Montessori overlap so much. I mean, I've really studied Montessori, and then just in terms of the last 5 years, I'd say more and more books in RIE and kind of trying to understand it. let me throw some pushback and see where we might, where RIE and Montessori might have some differences, and see what you think. One is, what age does RIE go up to? Or is it kind of like a mindset goes through all ages, but we don't have, specific guidance for it? And then related to that, I know we had reconnected over, should you teach reading or not, which, Montessori is definitely about teaching some of these things where I don't know with RIE. So hopefully both of those questions would work. What age does it go up to? And do you see it as kind of a mindset approach? And then, maybe we can hop into one specific example with reading in terms of explicit teaching or not.
Sure. So the classes go to age 2, but my classes used to go on because I just have a thing about toddlers. I love working with toddlers, and the parents really would need a lot of help at that stage, and they didn't want to quit. I didn't want to quit. So we kept going nice. With the children until they literally were too big for the space, and they were just kind of destroying it. But it goes for 2 years for all the reasons that we were talking about at the beginning of this. I just have to say too, I have a cold, so I'm hearing my voice going, oh, this doesn't sound much.
Oh, no, you sound great. And I was going to mention that, earlier one, but I'll tell you, I am so stoked that you decided, even though you're sick, to come on. So it's huge.
It's a great distraction, and I'm enjoying it. But anyways, so all these things that we're talking about where this line of demarcation is between non-person or not quite a person yet and person, and the importance, or I don't even want to say the importance, the power and the helpfulness for us as parents of starting early. So that's why this is about the first 2 years. That's one of the reasons, because this is the foundation for the person we're bringing into the world. This is where they're learning about relationships. This is where they're learning about self and what kind of learner they are, and if they have the goods to do all the things that we want them to be able to do in life. And those messages, if we give children those messages early on, or as early as possible, if we're jumping on this later, then they're going to go in deeper and be more effective and last their whole life. So this is the most important time, these early years. And that's scientifically proven again and again, that there's much more development that happens in the first 2 to 3 years than in the whole rest of our lives put together. So this is the time to try to get those messages, to get clear on our role with our child and the messages that we want them to learn through experience, which is the way that they learn best, and through our modeling. So it's a profound time. And the other reason was that Magda was particularly interested in this time that people tend to ignore as a time to really understand a child's point of view and engage with them as a person. But she thought, because they're pre-verbal, right? I mean, they're not pre-verbal in terms of understanding, but they're pre-oral, whatever you call it. I can't think of the word now. They're not speaking. So this is actually, they can't tell us all these nuances of what they need and how they're feeling. And so we tend to kind of one note them a lot of the time. But what she said is, this is far from a time to ignore. This is actually the most important time, when they're not able to share those nuances, how we can try to learn about them, how we can let them know that we want the nuances, that we want the communication, that we're not trying to shut down every time they make an uncomfortable squeak or anything, that we're not trying to, move them around, move up and down, get the baby to stop doing that. We actually want to understand everything. And even if we only get it right 1/10 of the time, just that effort of wanting to, our child gets that from us, right? Our child is so aware and absorbent, our baby, and they're learning, they want me to share. They want me to help them understand my point of view. So it's just this most powerful message at a very powerful time that we want to try to give children. And then when we do, they are pretty much, we're set in our relationship. You know, we can start. I mean, I really have not needed anything else personally, but I mean, I'm very immersed in this, so more than most people would be. But when people say, who's somebody teaching what you teach for older children, I have some people that I like, but I don't know. I didn't really need that myself, because this was so.
But were your kids homeschooled, or did they go to schools, or?
They went to school. So the thing with this approach is that, and this is going to delve into the reading question, I guess. Mm-hmm. What we want to give them with this approach is this window of time. So it's the relationship, the free play that we're giving them, the following your interests. We're allowing you to learn rather than trying to teach you what we think you should learn, because that's interrupting what you're working on. That might be much more important to you and is actually training you how to be a learner for life. So those kind of messages we want to be careful with. And then so ideally they'll have this with this approach all the way through until what Piaget called concrete operational stage, which is when they're 5-6 years old. And then, you know, what he theorized that at this time they're ready to take more direction, you know, in terms of their learning, and that their brains are suited to that. And they actually want, like, you'll see children that age and they want to know the rules, like they're very rule oriented. Sometimes they want to get it right and know the rules and all that stuff. And it's a development that happens in the brain. So with this approach, we want to give them this whole window of time up until then to learn about themselves, to explore their own interests as much as possible, not try to tell them what they should be interested in, but give them as much time and space and encouragement to explore self, so that they come into school with such a strong sense of self and confidence in who they are, that no matter what kind of school, and my kids went to quite a traditional school, but no matter what kind of school, they can thrive and have perspective on it, because, and then also in their free time still do these other things that they want to do, but that they come into that after all these years of being allowed to be learners and players the way that they choose to. They come in with this amazing foundation around self. And that's what I noticed with my kids, because they did have the grades and they didn't have grades in kindergarten, but they had the check plus and the smile face. If you did, you know, they had all of that stuff, and they put it in its place. They didn't get into it. You know, they didn't feel like it was labeling them, or, you know, they were so strong in who they were that they could thrive anywhere. And so that's what this approach does. So therefore we don't teach them reading and before that, but in school, then they're going to learn reading. And two of my two daughters were both readers. They chose to be, you know, because I used to read to them a lot, and by 4.5, they were fluent readers. I never once tried to teach them. I only responded to their interests. And my son learned in school, like a lot of kids do. Yeah.
So have you been like sat in and observed like a really good Montessori classroom? I'm curious.
No.
Okay. So, I mean, it would be so fun to kind of switch at some point. Are you still in California, or where are you at?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. At some point, I'm on the East Coast now, but at some point we'll have to switch, you know, places and say, let's sit in there and then talk about what we've observed.
Yes.
But it is funny you saying, because one of the big things is I get from parents when I do these talks for the young children is, well, what happens when they go to traditional school? Because most of these kids, they've got no option, but they go to some type of, and it's the same type of language I use, is that they have a strong sense of self and they can take on anything. I think with Montessori, the idea is, well, why put them in anything? You know, so it's like she's put a lot of thought into what children need. So I wonder if where RIE and Montessori kind of spread apart is that Montessori thought, well, if you observe children, take like a simple thing. My son's a year and a half old. And I'm sure you saw this when you were kids, they want to dress themselves. So they'll, it's all sorts of funny antics that occur when a child is trying to dress themselves. And just as one example, Montessori saw that, oh, well, if we can do these dressing frames where they can learn to button in a frame, it aids them in that step so they don't get so worked up when they immediately go to try to button looking down at themselves. So it's kind of like aiding them along the process in something that they have joy in. So it's not like you're forced to use this frame, like they get a choice. But she observed that children actually love doing it, and it aids them in being able to, say, dress themselves as an example, which leads to more self-confidence. So I'm curious, in terms of RIE, I think if you're a parent at home, or even say there's a classroom, it's one thing to say, hey, you make sure you've got your boundaries, treat with respect, but how do they know what to utilize? Like, how would they know what to do with their child in terms of, I don't know, materials, or what would they have in the home? What's the guidance around that? Because there's a lot, obviously, in Montessori with materials and what's been developed over the years. Is there anything like that in RIE where it's like, hey, utilize this? I know there's a picular triangle. I mean, so how does RIE treat that type of thing, like materials or prepping children?
Well, you're tuning into their interest from the beginning, and those things change, of course. And then to the best of your ability, I mean, parents don't always have the ability to make this perfect space with all the stuff in it. But you want to try to notice when you're observing, oh, my child really is drawn to puzzles. So, or there's this one puzzle that they really like, put some other puzzles over there and see if they're interested or whatever. And I remember your thing about the buttons is reminding me of these books we used to have when I was a kid with the I think they still have, where there's like a zipper and there's like buttons and like you turn the page and you can try different things. And yeah, that's great. But you can also do that. So RIE places a high value on paying full attention during caregiving experiences, and because of all the learning that goes on there. So from the beginning with the diaper change, and this is another interesting thing I was thinking about recently that people complain about. I don't want to narrate a diaper change. Well, narrate, think about that word. That's saying that you're just an it lying there in a way. Like I'm not an it, but you're passive and I'm telling a story. Yeah, that would drive me up the wall if I had to do that 10
both
times
ways,
a day or whatever.
Right?
But it's not narrating, it's about engaging with. So the way you're having lunch with your friend and oh, here's the menu, did you see this? And here's the, do you want to be the one should you order first or should I, it's an exchange. You're not sitting there babbling away. You're maybe not saying even that much, but you're engaging with a person there. So RIE puts a high value on that and all of the things children learn, which is self-care, buttons, zippers. They start to try from the time they're babies. They want to try to do these things. And then what we do is minimal intervention. So we see our baby trying to do a snap. Snaps are actually really hard, so much harder than would have ever thought to do. And there's a way that you can hold one side firmly so that they're actually able to do the snap. But so they can't just do it on their own. But if you just help a little bit we don't want to take over and say, here's how you do it, but if possible. But we actually have shown them that with dressing because we've been dressing them and now they want to try. So we allow for that. And the same with a 3 or 4-year-old putting on all their clothes and they're, learning to tie their shoes and all of that. It's just responsive. It's just very responsive. So we may have some great things out there may have been items we could have gotten for our child that we didn't get, but somehow they learned everything anyway.
Yeah.
Plus anything like Magda wouldn't say, oh, don't have a learning thing about buttons in your house. If you want to have that, sure, but just don't say, okay, now honey, let's do the buttons time over here. Look, so that's the difference. It's like we get to choose. So one of her famous lines is we want our child to be the director, writer, and lead actor of their play. And so what are we? Well, we could be this appreciative audience that isn't just a zombie sitting there, but I notice you. And when you make eye contact with me, I say, oh yeah, I saw that. I saw what you were doing. You know, we're just responsive. We're in it with them, but we're in observing mode. And our other job, and this is the fun part too, is to create that. We're the set director. We get to create the environment for them. And another thing that we do, I don't know how Montessori feels about this, but we don't just exchange the toys. You know, we know that that thing is sitting there and our child knows that it's there, and we don't want them to come and say, where's that thing? You know? Yeah. So we're not just doing things to try to make it happen, but we're allowed to be the one to, or we should be the one to create the space, get the materials, have fun with that, have a lot of fun with that, and then see how our child does the exact opposite of what we thought they were going to do with that, but, or, you know, ignores that shiny new toy and likes the old, you know, pieces of dust that are like stuck to the wall. So it's that kind of surprise, that kind of prepping and then letting go. That's really fun. And I know that is part of Montessori too, but they just have more materials that are kind of meant for a certain type of learning that have a certain purpose. And I guess less of that with RIE, you know? With
and it's, I mean, the way you're talking, I think that I'd mainly try to focus on the similarities, because it's like you follow the child. So you're still observing, seeing where they're at. You're talking about the environment, like you are the creator of the environment. And that's where the joy comes from, creating this environment. Then the child is free to kind of explore. And it's the same with Montessori. So I think it's kind of like in both of our approaches. And again, I'm not like, it has to be Montessori. It's what aids the child. I think we probably have people that there's a lot of myths about it and so forth. Cause I get a lot of parents contacting me. I need to have this in the house and this material. And they just overwhelm their children with these Montessori materials, which, you know, Maria Montessori and people who really know would never do. Like you would never want to just have this, like, we've got all these wood materials and they're perfectly Montessori. And then just now go do the dressing frame, or, you know, or the math materials. So I think we're much more in line. But it's probably,
I mean, it's hard though. Yeah. Like when you have fancy stuff though, or when you have, or any kind of stuff, but it's hard to let go of it. Right. So that's the thing. Yep. That's the challenge for us that I personally find a fun challenge. It's like the same challenge I have, like letting go of cleaning out my closet and giving away stuff and everything. It's, you know, you put it there and then you totally let go of it, and you're not wishing your child
attached
over and play with that. Oh, do this learning thing now. I really want. So that process of letting go, it's kind of such a Zen thing, I guess.
It's like liberating, isn't it?
Mindfulness thing. And then it opens up this space for so much surprise and interest. And oh my gosh, my child keeps doing that same thing over in the corner or over here. And and then realizing, look how much they're learning from that, you know, they're learning.
It's exciting.
They're learning how to take the paint off the wall or something. No, I don't
know. No, but I mean, it is funny because we look at we look at those experiences and we're like, no, don't do that. Go do this. And it's like, how much they're gaining. I love your example. And I remember in your book too, it's like, if a child's reaching for something, it's not necessarily that they want to actually get the toy, but they might be looking at how their arm moves when they're reaching for it. So it's just, I mean, again, coming back down to observation, like we need to get better and better observing children. And I'm just, maybe to close up, because I don't want to hold you so long and I know you've got a cold. So I probably could talk for hours, and we'll revisit the reading at some point. But is there anything like just coming from, I mean, you're a parent, just kind of like a raw example of you. Now you're kind of viewed as this, oh, she's got it all set. You know, is there anything raw that you remember as a parent going through that journey and being like, oh man, I don't know what the hell I'm doing? You know, some experience, and then how you kind of overcame that? Because as you know, parents, they beat themselves up. Like I can reach the stage where I'm pretty good at not beating myself up, but it's, you know, it's every now and again it's there. So has there been an experience like that? And what did you do? If anything comes to mind.
Well, yes, there have been experiences like that. And it's mostly when my child or children were in a new phase and I was still in the old phase. And, with children, they're like, that could happen in a week, right? Oh, yes. Now we have this great routine where they always sleep this long after we do this. And then it just, as soon as you get into it, it's gone, right?
Yeah.
But that would happen. So that happened with, well, first of all, I was very lost in the beginning. I've talked a lot about that. Like I had no clue. And I was so down on myself and hating on myself. And then when I did start to go to a RIE class, I was beating myself up even more because I thought all this stuff, I was doing it wrong. I was getting the teacher wasn't judging me, but I was judging me.
Yep.
So I know how parents feel like that. I totally get that. But then, so I'm doing this very, I'm enjoying my amazing first child's play and how kind of cool and brilliant she is and capable she is. And I'm totally getting into that. And I missed the part where she basically was the boss of the house all of a sudden. She's only 20 months old. And now somebody kind of clued me in, just because she can do those things doesn't mean you should really leave that up to her. It was like, she had this, I don't know, there was a lot of stuff, but she had this, what we used to have the old days, a boom box, and it was in her room, and she was 3 years old actually by then. But I mean, I know this all started happening when she was 20 months, but I think she wasn't quite 3 years old. And she knew how to turn it on and off and put the cassettes in and play her music. And I thought this was so great that she could do all this. And then one night it was like 3 a.m. and we hear this music going off.
Nice.
And she'd gotten up to go play her music because she had this big distraction of this thing that she could do in her bedroom, right? So, I mean, that was just one example of the power I had just unwittingly, given her. And I think this is a common trend that can happen when we see our child is so capable and they're so articulate and they're so cool. And then we just, why should I lead this child? I'll let her lead me. She's, so good at it during play. Like, why not just let her do it all of the time? And you don't really see the difference. So that was a big one, where I had to kind of start from square one and be what felt like really, really strict to me, what wasn't at all, but was just, I'm not like that. So it really brought something out of me. And when I saw the difference, and this is why I wrote the book, No Bad Kids, and really why I feel like I have something to share about boundaries with parents, because it was such a journey for me. And totally, like I was saying about the dates, like not my MO at all.
Yeah.
And I had to find the still thinking myself as kind, leader in myself I didn't think was there. I never thought I could be that. And I found it because I loved her so much that I could see that I wasn't being loving, letting her tell me what to do. And everybody, I wasn't. And so to reframe love for myself like that was a big deal. And to be able to find that place in myself and then see how much more loving that was. It's like you're saying about what we're saying about the honesty, to be that honest leader that allows you to be so mad at me and, be scary, you're scary mad at me. I don't like this feeling, but this is love. Yeah. So it's a whole reframing of love and my role and my daughter, allowing her to be a happy-go-lucky child instead of this little boss,
I got to tell you, I appreciate you and Magda, so much, because I think that one thing that you're talking about, it's almost like it's not just about your daughter. It's about you too, the relationship, and then you as individuals, that I think it really comes through in Magda. And then in your work, extending it, is just that you cannot think of just one or the other. Like, if you're going to do everything for your child and then you're miserable, you're not helping either one of you. And I think it really comes across in your work and Magda's work. So just a big appreciation for everything you've been doing. So
thank you, Jesse.
And if there's, I don't know if there's anything else you want to share. I know I've kind of been asking the questions doing this. Is there anything else you want to say before we hop off?
Just thank you for being so open and your interest and just asking me to be here. And I really appreciate it. You're fun to talk to. And I do hope that I get to come visit your class someday. Where are you?
So I'm actually in South Florida near Miami now.
Oh,
So yeah, but yeah, every now and again I'll get back to California, and we should connect, because I think it'd be really cool. Just I love the idea when somebody, hasn't been in Montessori, just we both sit in the classroom and then come out and just chat about what we've seen, because you're going to see things that I surely will not see, and then I might see some things that you didn't see. So I just love that type of thing. And then obviously, if you get back into the RIE, I'd love to bring Ragnar, my son, and into one of those classrooms. That would be awesome. So.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I would love that. He's my favorite age, between 1 and 2. That's my
nice.
all-time favorite age. Just when I just fell madly in love with my children, just their personalities unfolding so much. And
well, I'd say then it's time for you to just hop on a plane and come on out, and you can spend some time with Ragnar and help us, in the house. So we're good.
Awesome.
Well, cool. Well, thanks again, Janet. It's been a pleasure. It's great to hear you kind of go through RIE and give a better sense of it for this audience. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse.
Coming out of my conversation with Janet Lansbury, I just want to point you in the direction of how to find out more about Janet and RIE, which is pretty easy to do. Just go to janetlansbury.com, and that's LANSBURY. Now, if you want to contact me, Jesse McCarthy, as always, you can go to montessorieducation.com. If you've enjoyed the episode today, make sure to like it wherever you're listening, share it with friends, leave a review or comment, do all of that good stuff. And I will just end here by giving another big thanks to Janet Lansbury. I sincerely hope that more and more parents and teachers are exposed to your work, Janet. Okay, that is all. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and adios until next time.